Portrait of a Lady on Fire, or in French such as Portrait d'une jeune fille en feu, is the new film, has just been released in the United Kingdom, but was released eons ago, last year, back in France, is a film written and directed by Céline Sciamma. Also, a massive radical left-wing feminist who her partner, who also stars in this movie, Adèle Haenel, infamously has recently stormed out of Les Césars, which was a week or two weeks ago, after the controversial award winner Roman Polanski for Best Director for his recent film An Officer and a Spy, also in French called J'accuse. Anyway, either here or there, this is the new film that they have released, and Céline Sciamma last film, the only film I saw of Céline Sciamma was a film called Girlhood, and that was a very good film, despite slight touches of self-indulgence. And is this film any better or underwhelming or overwhelming in comparison to her previous effort, Girlhood? And is it as good as the critics say it's good? Well, let's find out. So, Portrait of a Lady on Fire is basically about set in sometime in the 17th century, and it's set on some kind of island, I think it is. We're not really particularly given any sources of information about its location, of the time period it's set in, and so forth. All I could tell you is it's a period piece, and we have a woman who is this terrific artist who is basically drawing these women on pedestals and so forth, and she's a terrific painter and etc. And one day she is hired to basically paint this or interact with another woman played by Adèle Haenel, and it turns into a sort of doomed romance lesbian drama, and that's pretty much all I could say. And from what I just told you, by it being pretty much a romance lesbian drama set in this sort of period, you could see, even from the picture of the movie and the description of the plot line of what pretty much is what the film is all about, you pretty much know what you're in for. And that is exactly the case with this movie. But I'll tell you one thing for sure. It's a visually beautiful film. It's a beautiful looking period piece of a movie. Without a doubt. From the first frame to the absolute last, it's an immersive, beautiful portrait of an experience, you could say. Portrait of a stunning looking movie is what this film should be called. In a way, like Park Chan-wook's The Handmaiden, it's a film where every frame and every shot looks like it was done by painting, basically. And the exquisite level of detail that has been put into this film is also incredibly remarkable. There's a lot of long takes, a lot of quiet silences. There is not much necessarily loud environments. It's a very quiet film in that regard. Very long pauses between the dialogue, between the words and the script, that sort of kind of film it is. Lots of wide angle shots of characters just sort of staring at each other. A little bit like Nicholas Winding Refn, but not as slow as that. But it's also a slow piece, but an incredibly hypnotic piece in the same time, especially for 2 hours long. And you don't feel the time going past quickly or slowly. You're just so hypnotized by the method of how this movie is made, and it's an incredibly well-made movie. So kudos for Céline Sciamma for that regard. So as far as performances, plots, script for that matter, and it deserved, because it won Best Screenplay at the Cannes Film Festival, and rightly so for that matter. The number one the number one greatness about this movie is the way this film literally looks. The second being its direction and the somewhat long scenes that are completely necessary. It reminded me a little bit of the films from Ingmar Bergman. And he is known for having sort of long takes in an incredibly hypnosis sort of feel to them, such as Persona and The Seventh Seal, The Virgin Spring, and I'm trying to think of anything else. That one with Max von Sydow, Time of the Wolf. All these really profoundly hypnotic movies. And it also reminded me a little bit, for some reason, of Peter Weir's Picnic at Hanging Rock. It's that sort of slow, sort of tranquil, quiet, intimate somewhat, but also hypnotic sort of film. A little bit, but much more authentic in comparison to, say, the films or the most recent films of Sofia Coppola, particularly the Beguiled, right? So all of this is absolutely fantastic, yeah. But again, it's not a flaw, but it's also something that is incapacitating me to give this a somewhat 5 out of 5 masterpiece. And I could see, and I can completely understand why some people may not consider this as an absolute masterpiece, or some people consider it as a masterpiece, as they have every right to, and I could see why. But for my own taste, right, it's a film in my perspective that it will basically be completely adored and loved by people with a particular taste, right? And that particular taste is fans of lesbian dramas, LGBT, gay rights sort of films, not really into the surrealism somewhat, and much more into the how shall I put it, realist sort of films. But especially those who are huge fans of romantic dramas, right? And period pieces will absolutely love, and I mean love and adore, this sort of film. And I can completely see why. For my taste though, it's not particularly my cup of tea. And I don't want to sound harsh, because I do appreciate and admire this movie a lot, but it's just not my taste, and it's just not my cup of tea. It's, in a way, without breaking it all down to pieces, it's just an ounce too predictable from my own perspective. I've seen this sort of story done so many times in so many different ways, and I could sort of see right through it within the first sort of half an hour of this movie. The trouble is, I'm just so, like, mesmerized. But its outcome is like, yeah, that was a good film, but it's not as if I am profoundly surprised of what is going on within the storyline of this movie. And I felt that it was just an ounce too predictable from my own perspective. You know, we've got La La Land, even, you know, the sort of same story, just set in LA, and it's a musical. Moonlight, in a way, even though it's nothing like La La Land, it's a much more denser, darker drama, but it's still like a romance. Brokeback Mountain, again, Carol by Todd Haynes with Cate Blanchett and Rooney Mara. The same somewhat doomed lesbian romantic story that there's always they meet, they fall in love, there's some somewhat graphic sex scenes that happen. And luckily, not in the case of this, which I'm really pleased about, because it just didn't need it, right? Then there's a downbeat moment where they're feeling where one or the other of the partner relationship sort of feels betrayed by something, or something happens, so it makes them cry, and they sort of hate each other, and then they get back together again, and they live happily ever after, one way or another, whether or not it ends happily or not. That's pretty much what you get in these kind of films. No matter how well made they are, or how sad it is, or how beautifully shot, and the dialogue isn't excellent, etc., etc., etc. I've just seen this sort of story thousands and thousands of times, to the point that, like, in a way, like all the Marvel movies, it's just like, okay, I'm bored of this now. I move on, give something that is a little bit more unpredictable or original, or something that gets me going, not only hypnotized from the film, but also a complete unknown to what the next scene's going to be after that, and to the next scene, and to the next scene, and to the next scenes after that. So, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, just like those other terrific looking. I'm not saying terrific movies because it might not have shelf life, but just like those other terrific romantic dramas, like Carol and Blue is the Warmest Colour for that instance by Abdelatif Kechiche, in which that film I think is profoundly overrated and profoundly graphic, too much for its own good, trying to say something that is so like really forced in my face and way too indulgent, I personally believe, about that movie. Despite a lot of people love that movie and it won the Palme d'Or, etc., I'm not a huge fan of that movie for multiple reasons, but which I will not get into because I'm talking about this movie. But just like all those movies, Portrait of a Lady on Fire lacks that sense of shebang within its plot storyline, because this sort of story has been told many times. No matter how well made it is, no matter how beautiful and well performed it is, altogether, all in all, I am left not underwhelmed, but flat to a certain degree. Which is why I will give this movie a 3 out of 5. It is terrifically, everything about it is fantastic, but it doesn't have, as Quentin Tarantino will say, shelf life. This is a film that will likely not live for a very long time in comparison to something that, to a film that has a bit more divisiveness to it. And I think that is the reason why, from my own perspective anyway, is the reason why it doesn't live up to how many other critics and even filmmakers, for that matter, are praising and giving it awards and really, giving it high acclaim as much as I think it should be, you see. But I do appreciate the quality of this movie. So if you enjoyed my video review, please put a like and please subscribe. And yes, I'll do this film review in French. And take care, have a good one, arrivederci, and au revoir.